Welcome to the Inner Self Confidence Podcast. I'm your host, Katie Delamont. Real talk for women who are done overthinking, freezing, or abandoning themselves. If you are ready to feel calm in your body, trust yourself, and speak up without forcing it, you're in the right place. Because confidence isn't something you perform, it's something you build from the inside out. Let's go. Welcome to episode 49 of the Inner Self Confidence Podcast. Family estrangement, when walking away is the healthiest choice. In today's episode, I'm joined by Cari Fund, who we have a really interesting synchronicity story, which I go into in the episode. But what if the healthiest relationship in your life was the one you actually walked away from? Now, family estrangement is one of those topics that carries so much shame, guilt, and judgment. We're taught that family is everything, that blood is thicker than water, that no matter what happens, you should always forgive and stay connected. But what if the relationship is actually causing you more harm than good? My guest today, Cari, knows this journey intimately. She's an author, a cycle breaker, and someone who had the courage to make incredibly difficult decisions in order to protect her peace. She talks about her estrangement from her mother, specifically for 18 years, and why she has worked through, or not why, but how she's worked through her relationship with her father that was very dysfunctional and unhealthy, but they created space to actually have a more healthy relationship. Now, her story is very different than my own estrangement story because I am also was estranged from my biological father by force, not choice. I didn't have the decision. My decision was not made for me. I grew up not knowing my biological father because of the family secret that was kept from me for, almost 40 years. But together we are talking about grief, guilt, boundaries, breaking generational cycles, and what healing really looks like when people who hurt you are your own family. Let's dive in. All right. Well, welcome to the podcast, Cari. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted and excited to be here.
Yes, finally, after I think our third or fourth time of recording, which is always fun to play a little phone tag. Now, can you tell my audience, well, also I want to tell my audience that I randomly found you on on Instagram, and you grew up in West Virginia, as did I, and we literally grew up around 20 or 30 minutes, or maybe, but okay, max an hour away from each other. Summersville to Clay is that fucking close. And nobody lives in West Virginia, first of all. Second of all, like you live hours away from people because like it's so spread out. But then we both went to West Virginia University. You now live in Florida near where my sisters live, right outside of Miami.
Crazy.
And you lived in New York after college as well, like just so crazy. Um, but other than that, can you please tell my audience who you are, what you do, why you're so passionate about it? And we're going to be getting into the whole family estrangement stuff.
Yes, my name is Cari Fund. I'm a cycle breaker, a writer, a mom of two, podcast host, and I'm releasing a book this fall. Born and raised in West Virginia, like you said, moved to New York City for 15 years and now Miami for 12. So I like to say I'm a little country, a lot of city with a splash of some Miami heat, but I'm really grateful for where I came from. You know, West Virginia gave me grit, New York taught me how to hustle, and Miami has sort of reminded me to breathe. The short version of my story, I would say, is I'm 48. I spent about 30 years of my life being a really good daughter to my parents. Both are narcissists in different ways, you know, going along to get along, abandoning myself, over and over again. And, you know, eventually I had to choose between keeping the peace and sort of taking my power back. I became estranged at 31 to my mother, and with my father, through lots of communication and begging and boundaries, we have a great relationship now. He actually lives down the street. He's a great grandparent to my kids. And so I've experienced the toxic parents in both ways, through estrangements now of 18 years and through working with my dad, and allowing him, you know, working with me to still be in my life. Um, I would say that I, through my healing and my choices, no matter how hard they were, I've created the family that I've always dreamed of. I have a marriage that was modeled for me. and I've become the parent that I wish I had. So I'm feeling grateful at 48 after a lot of pain and shit and hard choices that no child or adult child should have to make.
Yeah, well, can we talk a little bit about that, about your childhood, the dynamics, any stories if you want to, give context?
Sure. So I said previously that both my parents were narcissists. My mother is that covert narcissist, always the victim. Um, I think I've been her therapist my entire life. My father, substance abuse, alcoholism, the big party social guy, so he was never really around. Parents were divorced as long as I can remember. I think maybe since I was 6 years old. Um, and so I lived with my mother, just an hour away from where my dad lived in West Virginia. So we would see him occasionally. But it was just that balance of being between them. I would say my childhood was like Mommy Dearest meets Goodfellas. So, and they were always fighting with each other. And my brother and I were just always caught in the middle. But at 14, when one summer when I was visiting my dad, I felt like this whisper. And now that I'm old enough to know what that was, I think it was intuition. But kids, what do kids know about intuition? Um, it told me not to go back to my mom. It told me to stay in West Virginia with my dad, Summersville, West Virginia, which is crazy because he was a party guy. He's never home. He doesn't know what it's like to raise kids. He substance abuse issues, but it was so quiet at my dad's house because he was always out with his friends and at the bars. And with my mom, it was just the constant like being a prisoner in her emotional pain. Like everything was seen through the lens of her pain, and she was just so disconnected, I think, on what her role was as a mother and teaching me about confidence and feeling loved and safe and just all that unconditional things that should naturally come from a mother. So at 14 I had to call my mom and tell her that we weren't coming home, my brother and I, and it fueled a bigger fire than I ever could have imagined, because instead of asking me why or working on a relationship or seeing what could change, it was I had shifted from her daughter now to like, you chose your dad. So from 14 to 31, it was another layer now of like, it's your fault for causing a nervous breakdown. I just became
Mm.
so much more to blame for her life choices. So I would say that at 31, I had met a man that eventually became my husband. I swear God like sent him to me in motorcycle boots. But I could really see my reflection in him because I never had a mother who mirrored me back to myself.
Mm.
I didn't even know what that felt like. I don't think I ever really saw myself until I saw the way that he saw me. So my relationship with my now husband really showed me that I'm worthy of these things that I want in my life. I deserve peace. I
Mm.
deserve joy. I deserve healing. And so, every time I would answer the phone with my mom, or even see her, it would take days to recover. Like, I mean, days, like an emotional hangover. So,
Mm.
I would say eventually being introduced to like real love and care in my life allowed me to really see what was going to change and what wasn't going to happen. And I had
Mm.
some more tough choices after the one at 14.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I feel like our stories are very similar in that way, where I really feel like my healing journey, even though I started doing meditating and I even lived in an ashram before I met my husband, it was really our relationship, not that it's perfect by any means, but I really believe that we get hurt in relationships and we heal in relationships, in relational, because it's all relational therapy. So we learn, our shadow side. There's no better person than your sexual, romantic, and life partner to shadow you back of your fears, all of the stuff you want to hide from the rest of the world. So, I think so many people think, oh, I've got to become the most semi-perfect healed person before I can attract a healthy partner.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily, I don't think that's the case. I think, yes, you need to be enough self-aware. You have to have enough courage to have uncomfortable conversations, but you can truly heal in relationships. You don't
Yes.
have to wait for them.
Now, let's kind of go to the whole decision to be estranged. So you said it didn't happen till you're around 31. And was it estranged back then from both of your parents? And then you can kind of take us through like why you've decided to obviously not have that relationship, but also your mother's choosing that as well too. So we can go into that. But yeah, can you take us through when it kind of came up? What was the like, was it a certain argument? Was it, again, an intuition nudge in the belly that said something? Like, what was that moment?
Well, I'm only estranged from my mom. I've never been estranged from my father because, again,
Mm,
he was always so busy with his social life. So I always had the distance, and that space to do the healing, even with him in my life. My mom was more of the, every day, all day long, living in the past, blaming me for things. Everything was about her pain. So it's really hard to hear your own voice or even see your life when you're constantly living in someone's past or being a reminder of how terrible I was as a daughter or how I was to blame for all of her, life's consequences. So I would say it's a slow build that eventually ended in a single moment. Years of swallowing things down, making excuses, trying harder, shrinking smaller. And then one day or one night, I just couldn't put a lid on it anymore because like the jar shattered. I never forget. It's the last time I ever spoke to my mom 18 years ago, last time I've ever heard her voice. But I was standing in my boyfriend, now husband's East Village apartment. We were ordering Thai food, and my mother called, and I probably shouldn't have answered the phone, but I did. And she just started on this rant about how terrible life is again, like the same conversation that had been happening since I was a child. Um, and I guess I had some more confidence than usual, just sort of like to push back and be like, this isn't a good time. I'm with so and so, like I'm trying to do this. And the three words she said to me, most mothers probably tell their daughters, I love you, those three words. My mother said to me, go fuck yourself. And in that moment, I realized like something clicked. Like I still can even feel and hear the click. Something clicked, and it's like, I was like, no more. Like, oh my gosh, like this is it. It's almost like I saw that I will never be able to be present in the relationship with the man standing right there. I will never be able to have this joy or do any of these things or grow or be the person I'm supposed to be in my life or who I want to be with living in this constant chaos and pain. And so I pretty much fucked off. And she'll have said I broke her heart, but honestly, if I had to break her heart to save mine, that's just what I did. So eventually it was those three words that I was like, this is enough. And that's the last time I ever heard her voice 18 years ago.
yeah, wow. And so because there's obviously, I think when we hear the word family estrangement, I do also want to talk about how it's both sided. It's not just children cutting parents off. There are parents who cut children off. And, sometimes both parties can understand. A lot of the times there's one party who's very confused. And another thing is we don't know if that's forever either. And I think this is a big thing with social media and our cancel culture, right? Like we're so quick to cut things, which is okay, but we think that's also forever.
Mhm.
And that's so not the case for some people. You just don't know. Obviously, you can potentially leave that door, but why do you feel that estrangement was more your path than just deep, deep, deep distancing, should I say? Like I moved to another fucking country,
Yeah.
15,000 kilometers away, but so because I can see a lot of my family members, and even, my husband's where, the best relationships are the most distant relationships. And you also mentioned that, your mom was very much talk, 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 be there, be there, be there. But it was harder to have a relationship when she was constantly the helicopter. Whereas with your dad, yeah, there was dysfunctional dynamics that weren't necessarily quote unquote healthy, but there was space
Yeah.
to breathe, to talk, to pause, to gather emotional information. And it might not be the healthiest, but it was more manageable. And this is, I think, another misconception that people think as a parent, if I'm present more, if I'm there more, if I talk to them more, but they don't understand the difference of talking with and talking at.
Yeah.
And then the whole accountability thing, which you can't make anybody take accountability. So it's an interesting one. Why do you feel for you, the estrangement was like, not this is what I have to do. And talk about maybe obviously the guilt that comes up.
Yes. Um, Okay, so for me, for example, my mother comes from a huge Italian family. So it was her and six other siblings. So I had six other aunts and uncles, huge Italian family, tons of cousins. And before the estrangement, she was telling everybody this story. Even before, ever since I was 14, people were already treating me different because I had already moved with my dad. So I had been listening to the drama and the lies and the character assassination from my mom since the age of 14 to 31. And it got to a point where like I had space with my father to heal and, keep him at a distance. He wasn't talking about any of this. He was living his life and being busy. He would occasionally bash and talk bad about my mom and put us in the middle of things, but I couldn't escape the drama because if my mom wasn't saying it, which was rare, she barely paused on all of the pain and the chaos. I had aunts and uncles and cousins that were gossiping, texting me. I couldn't escape this family tree of Cari is the horrible daughter. Cari caused her mother to want to kill herself or want to like a lot of heavy things. And my brother, I have a younger sibling that's still in contact with my mom. So the only way I saw it is that I have to remove myself from the situation because if I'm not there, how can you keep making up stories? How can I keep being talked about over the table while people are breaking bread? I just wanted it all to stop because even when she wasn't saying it, there were aunts and uncles or cousins. And I mean, that already sort of started when I was 14. Imagine being from 14 to 31, having to listen to this shit for so long. It's almost
Mm.
like, at what point, sometimes I don't know what's worse, the toxic person or the enablers, because they're supposed to be the healthy ones, seeing that like that's a child, that's the adult, and she shouldn't be responsible for all of these things or fixing her mom or being blamed for this or almost making her mom want to kill herself. Like who would do that like to a child? So this was like I was never going to, even with space, listening to all the gossip and being accused and constantly contacted, I was never going to be free enough to hear their voices, but also hear the broken voice within me that keep telling myself that maybe they're right, maybe I am to blame. So
Mm.
after between 14 and 31, I knew that I just had to remove myself from all of it to make it stop.
Yeah. And what was the guilt like following that?
Um, you know, I I have to say because I had dealt with it for so long,
Mm.
um, I was already being blamed for everything since I was a child, and it only got worse. And as I started to see like other family members start to treat me and ice me out and be cold and, say things about me that weren't true, I think the guilt was not as bad for me because it didn't go from like Monday to Tuesday. This was like over a decade and a half of like I had just had enough. And like no one is feeling guilty for hurting me or saying hurtful things or making up lies or making me, carry responsibility for other people's pain. And again, my husband, my boyfriend at that time was in my life and I was feeling joy and I was feeling loved and I was actually starting to realize that I'm worthy of all these things. So,
Mm.
I don't think I felt guilt until probably a year or so later. Honestly, I think I felt relief for the first time in my life. And I was just relieved that it was quiet, that I could wake up and like not know where the day was going to take me rather than know as soon as the phone rang, here we go again. So I think my guilt and my grief were delayed a bit. Maybe like
Mm.
until holiday came around and I didn't attend or something like that.
Yeah. And a lot of the times, well, one, you probably did genuinely feel a relief. Like that's obvious. But I do think there's also an element of disconnection
Yeah.
from our bodies where we shut down, we try to avoid, we don't think about it. Because like I even thinking about like my mom's death, and I honestly don't think I really thought about it and like our relate like I didn't go into my healing with that till like 4 years after she passed away. Um And so, things that's, I think, another misconception about healing and about also guilt. It's like, if you don't feel guilt, that doesn't mean that doesn't mean you're a bad person.
Right.
And
Right.
and I think the whole thing is like healing is about, trusting yourself. And if you trust yourself, there should be no guilt. The guilt
Yes.
comes before the decision because you're
Yeah.
feeling all this guilt and you're like, but this like this doesn't feel good and aligned. When you make that decision, and if you're like, very clear on what you want, what you don't want, there isn't going to be guilt. Like when I make boundaries, I don't feel fucking guilty. But at the
Yeah.
beginning, when you're first doing it, you might,
Yeah.
because you are disappointing people, you are upsetting people. People are going to misunderstand you. They're going to judge you. They're probably going to talk behind your back. So at
Yeah.
first, you probably do feel a little guilty, but once you start doing it a little bit more, and then you get this clarity, like the guilt is not really going to be there. Um,
Yeah.
Now, did you
I'm
have
sorry.
people?
You brought up something really important though, that, when you are setting boundaries and you are doing these things, like I think being around, like having the space and not having my mom in my life, I was able to see other healthy, like emotionally regulated adults like more often and without having that noise in my ear. Um, you come to realize that boundaries are not to shut people out. They're actually to help keep people in your life, and that a healthy person, like if I said to you, Katie, this really hurt my feelings. Can we talk about this? Or Katie, this is how I'm feeling. Like, can I explain something to you? I bet you're going to say, sure, Carrie, like let's talk. Like, and you're going to be open to communication and we're going to hear each other out. Toxic people, narcissists, people who have no interest in your well-being, they're going to get defensive. They're going to play the victim. Your boundaries help weed out people that are never going to have a two-way street with you when it comes to a relationship if you're not going their way. So, yeah, I honestly, I think I stopped having the guilt around the boundaries and things like that because I realized healthy people don't get defensive when somebody tries to create a boundary or even talk to them about a boundary.
Yeah, that is the first sign of emotional intelligence, and is telling somebody that they've hurt you and can you have a conversation. That will tell you if somebody is emotionally intelligent or not. And look,
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody were to say that to me, I would get like probably an automatic sink in my stomach. It wouldn't
Yeah.
feel incredible, but I'd be like, all right, here we go. This is going to be really hard conversation, but let this is how we do it. This is how we grow.
Yeah.
Now, did you have people trying to obviously pull you back into the relationship? And how do you handle like Mother's Day and birthdays and family gatherings? And if you want to speak on like how you've had that relationship with your dad, how that has grown.
Sure. So in terms of people pulling me back, I had certain aunts on my mom's side of the family that were very supportive. And as soon as they supported me, which just means still talking to me, my mom cut them out of their life because you're on her side, then you can't be in my life. But then the aunts and uncles, it was actually honestly easy to stay away because they were so nasty and so rude and so hurtful, and a lot of my cousins that just sort of followed them. So I didn't really have people pulling me back. I think the hardest thing was my brother because he
Mm,
saw his relationship with her, which isn't healthy. But I think moms and daughters are very different with their moms and sons.
yeah.
But he would guilt me or a little bit, or why can't you talk to her and why can't this? And he's also younger than me, so I protected him a lot, and I didn't. I sort of mothered him growing up, so we just
Mm,
had experiences with my mother. But I would say the only person who really maybe guilted me was my younger sibling, which he doesn't so much anymore, or at all. But and he knows I have kids now, and like that's my priority. So my mom's feelings are not a priority over my kids' feelings. Um, but with regards to Mother's Day and things like that, I would say, the first couple Mother's Day, like I felt terrible. I felt shame. I was like, everyone's like, Happy Mother's Day. And it's like, what are you doing? I don't even talk to my mom. So there was a lot of um, shame and guilt around that. Um, but then I think once with time and space and healing, those things slowly just started to dissolve. And I can say today, I mean, I've been a mom for almost 12 years. My mother doesn't even register on Mother's Day for me anymore. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's sort of my day and like my mother-in-law's day. Um, and that's where I really learned there's a difference between like, a title, and who the actual person really is in life. But I don't get sad anymore on Mother's Day. Like I embrace it being my own celebration, and we celebrate my mother-in-law who's fantastic and she's like the mother I never had. Um, but my dad celebrates Mother's Day. Like we go over and we see my dad. So it's I don't know. I've just really learned over the years. I mean, it's been 18 years to that's the choice I had to make, and these are the consequences. And I can either have this mom, this woman who has the title in my life and just suffer and probably not have the life that I have today, or I can rewrite what these holidays, Mother's Day or whatever, sort of really mean to me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And what do you think people misunderstand about estrangement? And do you ever have people who say certain things to you that kind of surprise you?
Well, the trolls on Instagram love to come after
Oh,
me.
yeah.
But I welcome it. I used to sort of get a little like defensive about it, but I would never really respond to them. But I welcome it because I think dialogue and conversation is like maybe a way to inspire people. It really
Yeah.
hasn't yet. Maybe one or two people out of thousands and thousands of people that come after me. But I there's so many different flavors of estrangement.
Yeah.
Flavors of the same wound. And
Yeah.
mine was the last resort. I had to, like I said, break my mom's heart to save my own. And some people have it as a choice. Some people they don't. But I don't know. I walking away, my estrangement led to my empowerment. And I think people that don't experience this or ever have to make that decision or choice, they don't understand it. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of times, when I say things about estrangement or share my story and people get upset, they're not really upset at me. It might be triggering something or making them think about their own relationship with their own mother.
Mm,
And they're that's a hard pill to swallow because nobody willingly wants to sort of not orphan themselves, but nobody wants to like dispose of their family, and now you have no village or the people who are supposed to love you the most in the world.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I was by force, not choice. I was estranged from my biological father. I mean, I say force, but somebody did tell me when I was 18. So technically, my soul decided not to choose that for whatever reason, but it was definitely by force up until I had any conscious awareness. But I mean, it's a different grief, obviously, because you didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
And I'm such a believer that everything happens exactly the way it's supposed to happen. And you can call it woo, you call it like what do they say, spiritually bypassing things. And I'm like, I don't give a fuck what you want to call it. I believe it. And I truly believe that, yes, for whatever reason, it is some sort of protection. Like you
Yeah.
choosing it and me having it been forced, there was some sort of protection. Does that mean that it's better off? Nobody knows because we're not in that situation. It's like you can't say that one is better or worse. All you can say is, this is what feels aligned for me, and just
100%.
trust that.
Yeah, I mean, what's similar is the absence. So the wondering, the space where a parent was supposed to be, whether you walked away or were kept away. So there's still an empty chair, like either whatever, no matter the scenario. And I think that's what hurts.
Mm. And so, what did estrangement teach you about your own patterns, the way you show up, and may or may not abandon yourself? It sounds like, and again, similar to me, when you leave the dysfunction and you create healthy relationships,
Mhm.
it it is like, oh, wait, we don't have to live in dysfunctional relationships. We can actually be healthy and mature and then you start attracting more of that because that becomes more of your reality of like, oh, it can be this way.
100%. Ironically, what I also learned is, which also showed me how much healing I still needed to do, and just having like the self-awareness of that is, just because the relationship ended with my mother, it showed me so many things I had to create during those years of like survival. The people pleasing, I was bulimic for decades, numbing, like I also still chose, well, before I became estranged from my mom, and then afterwards, I was still dating. I started dating narcissists, people I could fix, people like I could change to see if I was worthy of their love. Even of like within recently of 5 years or so, I've literally distanced myself from certain girlfriends because I realized, oh wow, alcoholic like my father, oh wow, covert narcissist. Like I was still repeating, even though I'm happily married and raising my kids and living this life. I still noticed throughout my estrangement journey that I was still repeating relationships, trying to fix the very relationships I couldn't from my childhood. So that was a big
Mm.
awakening for me, especially with certain girlfriends. I think that can sort of maybe be like the loneliest part of healing is that spending a lot of time with myself, the silence. I took up meditation, just being able to not live in the chaos and the fight or flight. Because, if you're busy and everything's fine. But to really sit still and be present in your life, even when it's painful and yucky and it's just, you know, oh, like it's so much easier sometimes just to pretend. I started really noticing like, oh my gosh, I'm reliving certain relationships in my current life that are just like my mother or father, which is insane to me. I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah, yeah. You don't know what you don't know. A fish
Yeah,
only knows the water they swim in. And it's like hindsight is obviously a bitch. But I always say, like, when you practice mindfulness and being present in the moment, it's like taking a pill of hindsight in the present
yeah,
moment. Like you can see, oh, okay, I'm literally playing out dynamic. Like, and the thing about all of us is we all do attract the same lesson until we learn it. And then we go into the next lesson. But can you talk about a little bit about your own healing process, what that looks like to you, what it still looks like to you?
yeah. I mean, as soon as so I really wasn't doing any like major healing after the estrangement. I was just leaning into love, leaning into my life, just trying to get balance with this newfound peace and silence and not having my mom in my life. So I thought that would just make me feel better. But I just honestly, it was like in the small choices. Like I would just make it better choices. Whether it's like saying no more to people or I would make more time for me. Um, it wasn't until for me, it wasn't until I got pregnant, um, which would have been 4 years after my estrangement, that it something really freaked me out. I found out that I'm pregnant, I have this baby, and all of a sudden it was like, how can I do this without a mom? I don't know what it's like to be a mom. I'm telling myself all these stories. Meanwhile, my mom was never that mom. But it's like all of a sudden I was tricking myself into thinking my mom was like the ones you see in the movie. So I'm like, how can I do this without her? Like I was just like I got so scared that I wanted to be so much better than what she was to me. I wanted to be so much more self-aware. I wanted to do everything right that I actually went completely to the next extreme. I was the helicopter mom. I was all the organic stuff, all the safety stuff. I went sort of crazy just trying to protect my pregnancy and my child and then my second child for years to almost where I woke up one day and I wasn't feeling well and I went to the doctor and got my labs done and my labs were like a mess and I had gained weight and I was having all this stress. I wasn't sleeping for almost a year, like 4 hours a night. So someone recommended a functional medicine doctor and this woman went over all my labs and then she asked me the weirdest question. She was like, how's the relationship with your mother? And I was like, what are you talking about? Why are we not talking about vitamin C or creatine or hormones or something? And she started talking about the relationship with my mother and how we hold trauma and generational trauma can repeat cycles and things like that. And I literally broke down and cried so hard. I don't even remember the last time I cried like that. And she was like, wow, your mother did a real number on you. And it was so interesting to be validated from a woman that's looking at numbers on labs. And she pretty much told me, like, you have to forgive yourself. I had no idea that there was such a thing as self-forgiveness. So I would
Mm,
say, even though I've been estranged for 18 years, I'm 48 now, I would say around 42 years old, I had this call, this one Zoom call for 2 hours with this functional medicine doctor. She suggested I do a 30-day meditation every morning of self-forgiveness, like literally
mm,
chopping the cords to my past and telling
mm.
myself, I forgive the way I treated myself, the way I allowed others to treat me. And then I started, a lot of people don't like the word meditation. Some people don't. So it's sitting in silence or just sitting in peace and quiet, whatever the word you want to use. But I
We
started
all
meditating.
naturally meditate at some point. But anyways, yeah, that's a whole nother
Yeah, I mean,
conversation.
people are just like, what do you mean meditation? But it's like, go sit in your backyard in silence. Like, no phone, no listening to podcasts, no nothing. Just close your eyes and see where your heart, your soul, whatever you want to say, God takes you. But I started meditating, and every morning I started waking up and I started writing 5 or 6 things down that like I'm grateful for in my life to really keep me present in my life. And I did that for like 2 years, and like slowly but surely it's just those little choices every day, the
Mm,
meditation, journaling, the self-forgiveness, that I just started releasing so much pain and shame that I still didn't know I was carrying. And like my shoulders dropped and I stopped being so scared of the world, because that's the thing when you grow up and with toxic parents, and especially a mother who, makes you feel not worthy, doesn't give you unconditional love, tells you you're a terrible person and you're cold,
mm,
you start to believe those things. So I didn't realize, you know, who I really was or what I had to offer. And I think I was so scared of just failing at my life and my mothering that I was scared she was right in some way. So I
yeah.
stopped really trying to prove myself and just started being present and loving my family and allowing them to love me. And I mean, it's slow and steady wins the race. I mean, this is now, I'm 48, but I would say, a little by little, I just would wake up and my elbows or my shoulders aren't in my ears, and I'm not like anxiety and panic attacking and all the scenarios or what's going to happen between now and lunchtime. It just all sort of like slowed down and stopped. So maybe instead of having 5 terrifying thoughts a day, I have one a week. You know what I mean? It just sort of like happens over time if you like do the work. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I mean, 1%, 1% every day. Like
yeah,
it's always about consistency. And I talk about this so often that we just live in this like zero to hero
yeah,
society where we have to be at a 10 all the time. We have to be perfect. We have to be optimal, like every fucking thing. And it's like, one, it's not sustainable. Two, it's not practical. Three, it has nothing to do with compassion. It's all about perfectionism.
yeah,
Like it's just, and it's not going to work for your body because if you're constantly like health is and yes, I've made health basically my life, but it hasn't consumed me to where I'm so like I don't wear any fucking like I don't track anything ever in my life. I never have, I never fucking will because it causes
yeah,
more anxiety, more
yeah,
comparison, the whole comparison thing. It's like you're only ahead or behind if you compare yourself to somebody. Like there's no such thing as I'm behind or I feel ahead. It's
yeah,
like it doesn't exist. And I have to remind myself of that every day because I have the imposter syndrome of like I'm not doing enough, I'm not ahead enough. But
yeah,
it's like when you zoom out, you can hear that voice as just another thought that's coming through. It's not that serious.
mhm,
Um, you don't take it so personal. But I love that it was such an interesting journey and how it was not until like 42 that all of this stuff sort of really coming out. Yeah, that's major. And I love that it was meditation because that's my that was what really changed my life. And I'm not saying it's for everybody, but honestly, if everybody did meditate, it would get rid of so many things. And people just don't do it because it's uncomfortable, not because it's
yeah,
hard. It's just
yeah,
uncomfortable.
yeah.
And yeah, and you don't grow in the comfort, that's for fucking sure. All
100.
right. Now let's see. I think, yeah, the only other question I have is the one I ask everybody at the end. So this is the Inner Self-Confidence podcast. What does inner self-confidence mean to you? Or if you were to explain it or define it in your own words?
I would say it means trusting yourself, even when there are voices outside of you, or even including your own, because you've been trained to doubt yourself. For me, inner self-confidence, I would say, was not built in some highlight moment, but it's built in the thousands of quiet little choices.
Mm,
And you just stop betraying yourself. So I think it's to say the true thing that's on your mind or how you feel, to stop apologizing for existing. And I think really that's the whole game.
yeah. And would you say if there was somebody listening now who was kind of on the fence whether or not to, distance themselves or even estrange themselves from a family member, would you say that's kind of the same advice?
Yeah, I mean, everybody gets really uncomfortable because of these titles.
Yeah.
Um, Society really shames people with the family member because, the family is everything title, when honestly, it's family is not everything. I think safety is everything. So I would say, sometimes you can take out those titles of mom and dad or aunt and plug in husband or girlfriend or coworker and ask yourself, like, if other people were treating you like the person in your family that's hurting you, would you tell your sister or your brother or a friend to, oh, but that's your boss, or but that's your best friend, or that's your husband? Like, no matter the title, I think I would tell somebody that you can always take space and pause. And nothing you decide has to be forever. Sometimes it ends up being, and sometimes it's, a week or a month or a year. I don't know. There's no rules to this. What it comes down to is that every human being is worthy of peace and joy and safety. And I think once you realize you're worthy of that, take action. I can't tell you what that action should be, only you know, because there's no one size fits all to healing or estrangement. But just know that you are worthy no matter what that is. So sometimes if you need to get your mind over that society and the shame and the blame, plug in a different title. Like, if my husband was treating me the way my mother was treating me, I probably would not have stayed for 31 years. So I think that's maybe a good way to give yourself some peace when you're going through this and having to make difficult decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, can you tell my audience where they can find you, when your book is coming out, and yeah, if you've got anything going on at the moment?
Sure. You can find me at cari.fund, CARI.FUND, on all social media platforms. My podcast is Surviving Roots, and my book is coming out this fall, October 2026.
Woohoo! Awesome. Well, thank you again for your time and your energy and your wisdom. We'll chat soon.
Okay, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Inner Self Confidence Podcast. If you want to check my memoir out, Trust the Flames, jump on Amazon or my website, www.katiedelmon.com. It's also where you can find out how we can work together. You can download a bunch of freebies. I've got a nervous system reboot program. I do one-to-one coaching. And if you want to also just see what I am all about on social media, Instagram is where you can normally find me, Katie Delamon. And until next time.